I won $72 million. To test my greedy family, I begged for surgery funds. Mom said, "Die in the street." Sister laughed. Only my sister-in-law pawned her ring to save me. Revenge began. My name is Grace, and I am 33 years old. I work as a freelance digital illustrator. Let me paint a picture for you of a rainy Tuesday evening in late October. The kind of evening where the cold seems to seep right through the thin, poorly insulated walls of my cramped, fourth-floor walk-up apartment in Queens. I was sitting at my chipped kitchen table, wrapped in a faded fleece blanket because I was too terrified to turn up the radiator and face another massive heating bill. The rhythmic drumming of the rain against my single-pane window was the only sound in the room, save for my own breathing. I had a cheap cup of instant coffee in one hand and my phone in the other. Resting on the table, right next to a stack of past-due electricity notices, was a small, crumpled piece of thermal paper. A lottery ticket. I had bought it on a whim 3 days ago after a client completely ghosted me on a massive invoice. I had checked the winning numbers online once. Then twice. Then, my vision actually blurred, and I had to put my phone face down on the table to stop my hands from shaking. I checked it a third time. Then a fourth. The numbers matched. Every single one of them. The reality of the situation hit my chest like a physical weight. After taxes, the exact cash payout sitting right there on my sticky kitchen table was $72 million. It was an amount of money so staggering, so entirely incomprehensible to a woman who routinely ate instant noodles for dinner, that my brain simply refused to process it. I was a multimillionaire. The heavy, suffocating blanket of poverty that had draped over my shoulders for my entire adult life was suddenly, violently ripped away. But before I could even let myself celebrate, before I could dream of buying a house or booking a flight to somewhere warm, a dark, heavy shadow crept into my mind. My family. To understand what I did next, you have to understand the absolute toxic wasteland that is my bloodline. My mother, Diana, is the grand matriarch of a lavish estate in Westchester County. She is a woman entirely obsessed with country club status, luxury brands, and projecting the perfect image to her wealthy friends. To her, appearances are not just important, they are her entire religion. Then there is my older sister, Chelsea. 36 years old and the absolute, undisputed golden child of the family. She is a supposedly highly successful real estate agent operating out of the financial district in Manhattan. Chelsea loves to flaunt her wealth, her designer bags, and her perfect, curated life. And finally, my older brother, Bradley. 38 years old, a regional sales director, and the most arrogantly aggressive man you could ever have the misfortune of meeting. He treats everyone around him like completely disposable pawns. And then, there is me. Grace. The designated scapegoat. The financial burden. The embarrassing secret. You see, I look exactly like my late father. He was a blue-collar carpenter and a struggling artist. Diana married him when she was young and foolish, and she spent the rest of her life deeply resenting him for never making her wildly rich. When he passed away, all her bitterness and hatred transferred directly onto me. Because I inherited his face, his quiet demeanor, and his passion for art, Diana looked at me and only saw the biggest mistake of her youth. While she happily paid for Chelsea's expensive private college and funded Bradley's extravagant lifestyle, she kicked me out at 18 with absolutely nothing. I was meant to be the failure to make them all feel superior. Looking at that $72 million ticket, a sick feeling twisted in my gut. If I claimed this money publicly, they would instantly swarm me like vultures. They would demand a piece of the pie, claiming we were family. But before I hired a team of lawyers to lock this fortune down behind anonymous trusts, I needed to know the absolute truth. If I was truly at rock bottom, if my life was genuinely on the line, would my mother and my sister catch me? I decided to run one final, cruel test. 2 hours later, I was sitting on a hard, cracked vinyl chair in the freezing waiting room of a local emergency clinic. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed loudly overhead, and the smell of industrial bleach burned my nose. I did not actually have a medical emergency. My appendix was perfectly fine. I was completely healthy. But tucked safely inside the inner pocket of my cheap denim jacket was my golden ticket. I took a deep, shaky breath, unlocking my phone. My hands were actually sweating. I dialed my mother's number first. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. When she answered, I forced a frantic, desperate tremor into my voice, an act I had been practicing the entire drive over. "Mom? Mom, I am at the emergency room right now." I gasped out, letting my voice crack, pretending to hold back heavy tears. "The doctor just told me my appendix is severely inflamed. It is about to rupture. I need surgery immediately, tonight. But my freelance health insurance lapsed last week because of a billing error. The hospital administration needs a $900 deposit up front just to admit me for the operation. Please, Mom. I am in so much agonizing pain right now." I gripped the plastic edges of my phone, holding my breath. I waited for the maternal instinct to kick in. I waited for her to ask which hospital I was at, to tell me to hold on, to say she was grabbing her keys. Instead, a long, deeply annoyed sigh echoed through the speaker. "Grace, do you have any earthly idea what time it is?" Diana snapped, her tone dripping with absolute disdain. She did not sound worried, she sounded inconvenienced. "I am currently at the country club. I am meeting with the event coordinator and the florist. We are picking out the custom centerpieces for the annual charity gala tomorrow. I absolutely cannot deal with your dramatic financial crisis right now." My heart physically sank into my stomach. "Mom, please," I pleaded, keeping up the desperate act. "This is a literal medical emergency. I could die if it ruptures. I just need a small loan to get through the hospital doors. I swear to you, I will pay you back every single cent." Diana let out a cold, sharp laugh. It was a sound that had haunted my entire childhood. "Your poverty is a choice, Grace," she stated, her voice lowering into a vicious whisper. "You chose to draw silly little pictures on a computer instead of getting a real, respectable job like your sister. You chose to live like a beggar. So, figure it out. Die in the street for all I care. You being sick is not my problem." And with that incredibly cruel, final statement, the line went completely dead. She hung up on me. My own flesh and blood mother would rather let my appendix explode than interrupt her floral appointment. I sat there listening to the dial tone, the harsh reality of her words sinking deep into my bones. The test was not over yet. I opened my contacts and dialed my older sister, Chelsea. The phone rang exactly once before she answered. There was loud, pulsing music playing in the background. "What do you want, Grace?" "I am at a networking event," Chelsea yelled into the phone, sounding highly irritated. I launched into the same frantic, crying speech. I begged her for the $900. I told her I was in the emergency room, doubling over in pain. Chelsea actually laughed. A loud, genuine bark of amusement. "Are you actually kidding me right now? You are calling me to beg for money? Look, Grace, you are seriously killing my vibe tonight. I am closing a massive real estate deal this week, and I am not going to let your pathetic, poor person drama drag me down. Try getting a real job next time." Click. She hung up. A second later, my text message app pinged. It was an automated message from my carrier. Chelsea had completely blocked my number. I stared at the glowing screen of my cheap phone in pure disbelief. Neither of them could spare even 30 seconds or a few $100s to save my life. I was fully prepared to call it a night, pack up my fake tears, and drive home. I had my answer. My blood family was rotten to the absolute core. I felt the last lingering thread of familial obligation snap completely. I owed them nothing. But just as I stood up to leave the waiting room, the automatic double doors hissed open violently. A sudden, violent gust of freezing wind and heavy rain swept into the sterile hospital lobby. I turned my head, squinting against the bright lights, and my breath caught in my throat. Fiona, my brother Bradley's wife, burst through the hospital entrance. She was completely soaked from head to toe. Her light blue pediatric nursing scrubs clung tightly to her shivering frame, turning a dark, heavy color from the downpour. Her dark curly hair was plastered against her pale cheeks, and water dripped steadily from her nose and chin onto the linoleum floor. She stood there panting heavily, her chest heaving up and down as her wild eyes scanned the empty waiting room. When she finally locked eyes with me standing near the vending machines, she let out a loud, audible gasp of pure relief. She practically ran across the slippery, wet floor. Before I could even speak, before I could ask her what she was doing here, Fiona dropped her heavy, waterlogged canvas tote bag to the floor and wrapped her freezing cold arms tightly around my shoulders. "Grace! Oh my God, Grace, are you okay?" she asked breathlessly, her voice shaking violently from the severe chill and the leftover adrenaline. She pulled back slightly, her hands gripping my arms as she looked me up and down, searching for signs of a medical collapse. "Have they taken you back for surgery yet? Tell me I am not too late." I was absolutely stunned into total silence. I could only stare at her. Fiona lived exactly 90 miles away, deep in the Westchester suburbs, with my brother. It was a torrential hurricane outside. The news had been warning people to stay off the roads all evening because of severe flash flooding and zero visibility. Furthermore, I knew for a fact that Fiona had just finished a brutal, demanding 12-hour shift at the pediatric ward. Yet, here she was. She had driven 90 miles through a dangerous, life-threatening storm, completely exhausted, just to get to me. "Fiona," I finally managed to whisper, my mind struggling to process the logistics of her arrival. "How did you even get here? Why are you here?" "Chelsea texted Bradley, making fun of you for begging for money from the hospital," Fiona explained quickly, her teeth audibly chattering. "I saw the message pop up on his phone while he was in the shower. I am so incredibly sorry it took me this long to get here, Grace. The interstate was completely flooded, and my car kept hydroplaning. The windshield wipers on that old car barely work anymore. I was terrified I wouldn't make it in time." My confusion deepened into a sharp, protective anger on her behalf. Bradley was a regional sales director making a massive six-figure salary. He wore custom-tailored suits and drove a brand-new luxury sports car that he constantly showed off on social media. Why on earth was his hard-working wife driving a 15-year-old, beat-up sedan with failing windshield wipers through a hurricane? Why did she look so incredibly worn down and fragile? The contrast between the warm, desperate concern radiating from this woman and the absolute ice I had received from my own mother and sister was jarring. They shared my exact blood, but they had gladly left me to die. Fiona was an outsider, married into this toxic mess, yet she had risked her own physical safety on flooded highways just to make sure I wasn't alone in an emergency room. Before I could ask her anything else, Fiona quickly unzipped a wet, hidden pocket on the inside of her scrub top. She pulled out a damp, white bank envelope and shoved it directly into my hands. "I know you told your mom the hospital administration wanted $900 up front," Fiona spoke rapidly, her eyes wide with frantic, desperate concern. "There is $200 in cash right there in the envelope. It is mostly in small bills, 10s and 5s. It is literally all the money I had stashed away in my locker at work." She then reached into the pocket of her scrub pants and pulled out a faded, badly scratched blue credit card. She pressed it firmly onto the damp envelope in my hands. "Put the rest of the surgical deposit on this card," she instructed, her voice trembling. "It only has a $500 limit, and I think there is maybe $400 left on it. It might decline, but we have to try. Hurry, take it to the front desk before your appendix completely ruptures." I looked down at the crumpled, wet money and the cheap, low-limit credit card resting in my palms. My heart physically ached. A massive lump formed in my throat that I could not swallow down. "Fiona," I said softly, looking back up into her exhausted eyes. "You work full-time as a registered pediatric nurse. You work overtime shifts. You make a very good, solid income. Why do you only have $200 and a credit card with a $500 limit? Fiona looked away suddenly, her shoulders dropping. A deep, heavy shame washed over her face. She wrapped her wet arms tightly around herself to stop the shivering. Bradley takes my paychecks, she whispered, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the thunder rattling the hospital windows outside. He forces my hospital payroll to direct deposit straight into his private checking account. He says I do not understand how to manage household finances. He gives me a strict cash allowance of $50 a week for my gas and my basic groceries. If I spend even $1 over that amount, he screams at me for hours. Pure, blinding rage surged through my veins. My own brother was financially abusing his wife. He was systematically stealing her hard-earned wages, controlling her every single move, and keeping her completely trapped in a state of manufactured poverty while he lived like a king. If the credit card declines, Fiona continued, her voice hardening with fierce, undeniable determination, we still have one more option. She touched her right hand. Resting on her finger was a beautiful, vintage gold band with a small, modest diamond. This is my late grandmother's wedding ring. It is the only valuable family heirloom I possess. There is a 24-hour pawn shop right off the highway exit a few miles back. I saw the neon sign when I drove in. I can get the rest of the cash there. We are not leaving this hospital until you get that surgery, Grace. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, and for the very first time that entire night, they were completely real. The test was officially over. I knew exactly who the real villains were in my family, and I knew exactly who deserved to be saved. I gently pushed Fiona's hands back toward her chest, wrapping her freezing fingers tightly around the damp bank envelope and the faded blue credit card. Fiona, you need to listen to me very carefully right now, I said, keeping my voice incredibly steady so she would not panic. I do not need your money anymore. While you were driving here through the storm, the hospital billing supervisor came out to the waiting room to speak with me. They found a massive loophole in my lapsed health insurance policy. The surgery is completely paid for. I am just waiting for the nurses to take me to the back to get prepped. Fiona blinked in heavy confusion, but the sheer exhaustion finally began to wash over her body, forcing her tense shoulders to drop. Are you absolutely sure, Grace? You are not just saying that to protect me? I am absolutely sure, I lied flawlessly, forcing the most reassuring smile I could muster. You drove 90 miles through a dangerous hurricane just to save me. I will never, ever forget what you did tonight. But right now, you need to get back in your car and drive safely home before Bradley wakes up and realizes you are missing. Do whatever you have to do to stay safe. I will be perfectly fine. Fiona let out a long, shaky breath, nodding slowly. She hugged me one more time, much tighter than before, and turned to walk back out into the raging storm. I stood in the bright, sterile lobby and watched through the glass doors as her beat-up sedan pulled out of the parking lot and disappeared into the heavy rain. Once she was completely out of sight, my entire demeanor shifted. The sad, pathetic sister routine vanished instantly. I walked out of the sliding doors, ignoring the freezing rain, and marched straight toward my own rusty car. I climbed into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and aggressively locked it. I reached deep into my inner jacket pocket and pulled out the small, crumpled piece of thermal paper. $72 million. My mother and sister had proven they would gladly let me die in the street. My brother was actively terrorizing and financially starving the only person in the family who possessed a genuinely kind heart. Running away and quietly living a rich life by myself was no longer an option. If I just disappeared, Bradley would continue to crush Fiona into dust. Diana would continue to play the untouchable matriarch, and Chelsea would continue to flaunt her fake perfection. I needed a weapon. A very specific, highly destructive, entirely legal weapon. The gears were officially in motion. They had absolutely no idea what real financial power looked like. But they were about to find out. Thank you for following the story this far. If you're feeling satisfied and looking forward to the upcoming revenge, Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment letting us know which city you're watching this video from. Every interaction helps the video reach a wider audience. Thank you very much. The very next morning, the storm had finally cleared, leaving behind a crisp, cold autumn sky. I did not go to my cheap local bank. I did not call any standard financial advisors. Instead, I drove my rusty 10-year-old car straight onto the interstate, heading directly into the towering glass skyline of Manhattan. I parked in an expensive underground garage in the financial district and walked into the sleek, ultramodern lobby of a premium corporate high-rise. I bypassed the main reception area and took the private executive elevator up to the top floor. I had spent the entire night researching the most ruthless, high-profile wealth management attorneys in the city, bypassing flashy local advertisements to dig straight into the top-tier corporate law firms. I needed a shark. Someone who specialized in aggressive asset protection, blind trusts, and hostile financial takeovers without leaving a single trace behind. Sitting behind a massive, custom-built marble desk was Harrison Cole. He was a senior partner, 50 years old, wearing a meticulously tailored suit that probably cost more than my car. He possessed the calm, calculating demeanor of a man who routinely destroyed corporate empires before his morning coffee. I walked into his spacious office, sat down in the heavy leather chair opposite him, and placed the winning lottery ticket directly onto the pristine marble surface. "My name is Grace," I stated clearly, keeping my voice entirely devoid of any emotion. "I am the sole owner of that ticket. The after-tax cash value is exactly $72 million. I need to hire your firm to claim this ticket on my behalf immediately." Harrison did not gasp or widen his eyes. He simply picked up the ticket, inspected the numbers, and gave me a curt, professional nod. "I want the funds transferred into a highly secure, anonymous holding company," I continued, outlining the plan I had formed in the hospital parking lot. "I want the company registered under the name Vanguard Zenith LLC. No one, absolutely no one, can know that my name is attached to that money. Consider the structure already in place, Grace." "It is a very standard procedure for high net worth individuals," Harrison replied smoothly, pulling a legal pad toward him. "But I suspect you did not seek out my specific legal expertise just to hide money in a holding company. What is your actual objective?" I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. He was exactly the right man for the job. "You are correct, Harrison. Hiding the money is just step one." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on his desk. "I need you to authorize an unlimited budget from my new trust account right now. Hire the absolute most aggressive private investigators and forensic accountants in the state. I want a complete, microscopic deep dive into 3 specific individuals in my biological family. My mother, Diana. My sister, Chelsea. And my brother, Bradley." Harrison folded his hands, listening intently, his eyes locked onto mine. "I want every single buried secret," I commanded, my voice cold as ice. "I want every hidden debt, every tax evasion, every forged signature, every secret bank account, and every single lie they have ever used to maintain their precious wealthy status. Do whatever it takes. Buy whatever information you need. I want enough legal and financial ammunition to completely level their entire lives to the ground." Harrison Cole smiled. It was a predatory grin that matched my own. "Consider it done. We will start digging immediately." 3 agonizing weeks passed. To ensure my family did not suspect a single thing, I had to maintain my cover flawlessly. I continued living in my freezing Queens apartment. I ignored the millions sitting in my Vanguard Zenith accounts. Most difficult of all, I had to silently endure the constant barrage of insults in our family group chat. Chelsea sent pictures of her sipping expensive champagne at 5-star restaurants, tagging the photos with captions about hard work paying off. Diana routinely sent passive-aggressive messages, reminding me that the holidays were approaching and warning me not to ask for any financial handouts for Christmas gifts. I read every single cruel word, swallowing my pride, knowing that the trap was slowly tightening around their necks. Finally, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Harrison Cole called me back into his Manhattan office. When I walked in, he was already waiting for me with 3 thick, black binders resting perfectly aligned in the center of his marble desk. "We started with your sister, Chelsea," Harrison stated, tapping his manicured finger on the first heavy binder. "And the findings are, quite frankly, staggering. The image she projects to the world is an absolute, complete fabrication." I sat down and opened the heavy cover. The very first page was a comprehensive financial summary of Chelsea's supposedly booming real estate corporation. I looked at the bright red numbers highlighted across the spreadsheets and actually let out a loud gasp of pure shock. For years, Chelsea had relentlessly mocked my modest freelance income. She bragged loudly at every family gathering about her massive, multi-million-dollar commercial property deals. She played the role of the ultimate successful golden child so perfectly that Diana constantly used her as a weapon to beat me down. "Your sister is an absolute fraud," Harrison explained calmly, watching my reaction. "She has not legally closed on a single residential or commercial property in over 14 months. Her real estate license is currently listed in a probationary status due to thousands of dollars in unpaid professional association fees. She has absolutely zero incoming revenue streams." "Then how is she paying for the designer clothes and the luxury lifestyle?" I asked, tracing my finger over a terrifying negative bank balance. "She is drowning in exactly $250,000 of unsecured, high-interest credit card debt," Harrison replied bluntly. "She has maxed out 14 different premium credit lines just to maintain the superficial appearance of immense wealth. Furthermore, that expensive luxury SUV she constantly posts on social media is 3 full months behind on its lease payments. There is an active repossession order on it. A tow truck could legally seize that vehicle at any given moment." I leaned back in the heavy leather chair, completely stunned. Chelsea was entirely bankrupt. Her entire glamorous identity was built on a crumbling mountain of predatory debt. But Harrison wasn't finished. He pulled a separate, sealed legal document from the back of the binder. "The credit card debt is actually the least of her immediate problems," Harrison continued, his tone turning deadly serious. "This is a highly confidential notice from the Internal Revenue Service. In a desperate attempt to secure massive tax refunds to fund her fake lifestyle, your sister heavily falsified her corporate tax returns for the past 3 years. She claimed hundreds of thousands of dollars in entirely fraudulent business losses. The IRS caught the discrepancies." I stared at the frightening government seal. "What happens next?" "They are demanding immediate repayment of the stolen funds plus massive penalties," Harrison stated. "If she does not produce a massive sum of cash very soon, they will move forward with criminal tax evasion charges. Your sister is staring directly at federal prison time." I looked down at the devastating evidence. My perfectly arrogant sister had unwittingly handed me the exact weapon I needed to destroy her. I closed Chelsea's binder and took a deep, steadying breath. "Chelsea was always reckless," I said quietly, looking at the second black binder. "But what about my brother, Bradley? He is a regional sales director who prides himself on being an absolute financial genius. He constantly lectures the rest of us on wealth building. He must have his accounts locked down tight." Harrison let out a short, cynical laugh. It was a rare sound from the stoic attorney. He slid the second binder directly in front of me. "Your brother is absolutely not a financial genius, Grace," Harrison stated, his voice devoid of any amusement. "He is an aggressive, high-stakes gambling addict. He doesn't bet on sports or play at casinos. He gambles heavily on high-risk options trading and highly volatile cryptocurrency markets. And he is catastrophically bad at it." I opened the thick folder. The very first page was a horrifying, color-coded graph showing a sheer, vertical downward plunge in his net worth. "According to my forensic accounting team, Bradley lost his entire life savings 3 years ago," Harrison explained, pointing to a massive red dip on the financial chart. "He blew through his personal retirement funds, his corporate sales bonuses, and every single liquid asset he possessed trying to cover his massive margin calls. But instead of admitting defeat, he decided to start aggressively stealing to chase his mounting losses. I flipped the page, my heart pounding violently against my ribs as I saw high-resolution copies of heavy legal mortgage documents. I leaned closer to examine the complex paperwork. "Wait a second," I said, my brow furrowing in confusion. "These are secured loan agreements. But they are legally secured against my mother's suburban estate in Westchester. Diana would never willingly agree to mortgage her precious house to fund his reckless crypto addiction. She values that property and her country club status way more than her own life." "She didn't agree to it." Harrison leaned forward, resting his elbows firmly on the marble desk. "Bradley blatantly forged her signature. Using his privileged position as the trusted golden son and the named executor of her living trust, he completely bypassed her legal consent. He secretly took out a massive $600,000 second mortgage on her house." I felt physically sick to my stomach. If he defaults on these massive hidden bank loans, the bank will immediately foreclose on Diana's house. She will be completely homeless, and she has absolutely no idea her favorite son did this to her. Harrison nodded grimly. "He is already severely defaulting. The bank sent a final legal notice of intent to foreclose just last week. Bradley intercepted the certified mail so your mother wouldn't see it. The bank will auction that house within days. He is desperately out of time." But the absolute worst part of his severe financial crimes involved Fiona. Harrison pulled out one final printed spreadsheet from the back of the folder. It highlighted rows of complex routing numbers and international bank accounts. I had my team specifically track the direct deposits originating from Fiona's hospital payroll. Harrison's tone softened slightly with genuine disgust. He systematically routed every single one of her hard-earned nursing paychecks into an offshore shell account located in the Cayman Islands, entirely under his own exclusive name. He is financially starving his wife to death while using her money to fund his disastrous stock market bets. The quiet room spun slightly as the sheer calculated evil of my brother washed over me. Fiona had offered to pawn her grandmother's ring for me, while her own husband hoarded her stolen wages offshore. Bradley was a true, ruthless monster. And he needed to be completely annihilated. The Thanksgiving holiday was just a few days away, and Diana was throwing her annual, pretentious dinner party. It would be the absolute perfect battleground. I closed the binder and looked at Harrison. It was time to prepare for war. Thanksgiving Day arrived, and the air in Westchester County was crisp, cold, and smelled of wood smoke. I drove my rusty, dented sedan up the long, winding road leading to my mother's lavish suburban home. I made a point of parking at the very end of the circular driveway, purposely squeezing my beat-up car right between Bradley's shiny new sports car and Chelsea's expensive luxury SUV. I wanted the visual contrast to be as jarring as possible. I was wearing a slightly frayed beige sweater and faded jeans that I had intentionally washed a dozen times to make them look even more pathetic. I wanted to look exactly like the broke, struggling artist they all expected to see. I walked up the grand brick steps and rang the doorbell. The heavy oak door swung open, and Diana stood there in a tailored silk blouse, dripping in pearls that probably cost more than my annual rent. Her fake holiday smile vanished the second she saw my clothes. She didn't even say hello. She just looked me up and down with absolute disgust. "Grace, you could have at least tried to look somewhat presentable for the holidays," Diana sneered, blocking the entrance with her body. "Do not track mud from those cheap shoes onto my imported foyer rug. Go around the back and use the side kitchen door. Fiona is struggling in there, and you need to go make yourself useful." I didn't argue. I simply nodded and walked down the side path. Inside, the kitchen was a disaster zone. Fiona was standing over the industrial stove, frantically basting a massive 20-pound turkey while simultaneously stirring 2 different pots of gravy. She looked completely exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and a thin layer of sweat on her forehead. "Grace, you made it," she whispered, giving me a quick, greasy hug. I felt my blood start to boil when I realized they were making her cook this entire feast completely alone while they lounged in the living room. Through the French doors, I could see Chelsea lounging on the white leather sofa, sipping an imported glass of champagne. She caught me staring and sauntered over, her crystal glass clinking as she walked. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Chelsea mocked, leaning against the marble kitchen island. "Still wearing clothes straight from the clearance rack, I see. I thought your little freelance art career was supposed to make you rich by now." Diana walked in right behind her. "I told her this would happen 15 years ago," she chimed in, glaring at me. "You threw away a perfectly good future to draw silly little pictures on a computer. And that is exactly why I kicked you out. I refuse to fund your lazy delusions." I gripped the edge of the granite counter, keeping my temper in check. "You kicked me out on the street with absolutely nothing," I replied calmly. "Yet you gladly paid Chelsea's entire $80,000 college tuition in full." Chelsea let out an obnoxious laugh. "That is because I actually have real ambition, Grace. I am a highly successful real estate agent closing million-dollar deals. You are just a starving artist begging for handouts." I smiled politely, refusing to let the words sting. I knew exactly what my private investigators had uncovered about her fake success. I knew about her crushing debt and her failing business. But I kept my mouth shut. I simply grabbed a knife and started peeling potatoes. Let them feel superior for a little while longer. The trap was already set. 2 hours later, we were all seated at the long mahogany table. The tension was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. Suddenly, Chelsea tapped her manicured nail against her champagne flute to get our attention. "I have a special surprise," she announced with a theatrical smile. She gestured to the sideboard where several silver trays were covered with heated domes. "I hired the most exclusive luxury catering company in the city to prepare our appetizers." She revealed hundreds of tiny caviar blinis and truffle tartlets. Diana clapped her hands in delight, praising Chelsea's refined taste. Then, Chelsea marched down the table and dropped a thick piece of cardstock directly onto my empty porcelain plate. It was an itemized invoice for $1,200. "Since you tried to ruin my anniversary preparation last month with your pathetic fake hospital drama," Chelsea sneered, "I figured you could pay for the starters today. Consider it your way of apologizing for being such a financial burden." Bradley laughed through a mouthful of truffle cheese. "Yeah, Grace. It's about time you actually contributed something of value instead of constantly draining our resources. Pay the bill or leave the food alone." I stared at the $1,200 invoice resting on my plate. I could have paid it 1,000 times over without even blinking. But that wasn't the point. The sheer audacity of Chelsea demanding that her broke younger sister foot the bill for a party she didn't order was sickening. I calmly picked up the cardstock and slid it back across the table toward Chelsea. "I am not paying a $1,200 catering bill for food I did not order, Chelsea," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Especially when Fiona has been standing over a hot stove for 10 straight hours cooking the actual meal we are about to eat. If you wanted to pretend to be generous, you should have paid for it yourself." The room went dead silent. Diana's face turned a violent shade of red. She slammed her palm against the table so hard the crystal rattled. "How dare you speak to your sister that way?" she shrieked. "You ungrateful brat. If you refuse to pay your fair share for this family gathering, you can get out of my house right this second." She even threatened to call the police and have me trespassed. I sat perfectly still. My own mother was willing to have me arrested on Thanksgiving over an appetizer bill. I needed to de-escalate just enough to stay in the house because the real trap was about to be sprung. I forced a deep breath and looked away. "Fine," I said softly. "I will apologize for disrupting the mood, but I am not paying that invoice." Diana huffed but sat back down. The tension remained, suffocating and heavy. Bradley, sensing the silence, decided to turn his cruelty toward the easiest target in the room, Fiona. He took a bite of the turkey she had spent all morning preparing and dramatically spat it out into his napkin. "Are you kidding me with this?" Bradley groaned, throwing his fork down. "This turkey is as dry as a desert. Fiona, you had one simple job. You literally cannot do anything right. It's exactly like your inability to manage simple household finances. He then turned to Diana. Mom, you'll love this. I had to enact some strict disciplinary measures at NA recently. Fiona decided to waste an entire tank of gas last month driving 90 miles in a storm to rush to Grace's fake medical rescue. So, to teach her a lesson about wasting my money, I cancelled her car insurance last week. She's been taking the public bus for her midnight shifts ever since. I looked at Fiona, whose eyes were brimming with unshed tears. My stomach churned with disgust. Bradley was bragging about financial abuse as if it were a joke. I slammed my hands on the table. Are you insane, Bradley? She works a full-time job, you steal her paychecks, and now you take away her safe transportation? That is textbook abuse. Bradley just laughed. You are a broke loser, Grace. You have zero power. Do not ever tell me how to manage my wife. Diana cleared her throat, cutting through the argument. That is enough. We have important business to conclude. She reached behind her and pulled out a thick manila folder, tossing it onto the table next to my plate. The bold letters at the top read, Quit Claim Deed. When my father passed away, he left 50 acres of undeveloped land in the Hudson Valley solely to me. For years, they had mocked it as a worthless patch of dirt. Now, Chelsea was leaning forward with a predatory smile. Since you are unemployed and can't pay your bills, we decided to do you a favor, Chelsea stated smoothly. My company needs a minor tax write-off. I am willing to take that useless dirt off your hands. All you have to do is sign this deed. I'll even give you $100 for your trouble. I pushed the document back. I am not signing over my only inheritance without an attorney, I replied. Diana's face hardened into ice. She pulled out a small black velvet jewelry box and flipped it open. It was empty. My vintage diamond brooch is missing, she announced quietly. And Fiona is the only person who has been wandering through the house all afternoon. Fiona gasped in horror. Mom, I swear I never went upstairs. I was in the kitchen the entire time. Diana ignored her and looked directly at me. This is not a negotiation, Grace. Sign the deed right now. If you refuse, I will immediately call the police and file a formal felony report for grand larceny against Fiona. You know exactly how the justice system treats people. She will lose her nursing license and spend 5 years in prison. Your choice, Grace. Sign the paper or ruin her life. The sheer, calculated evil of their plan took my breath away. They were using Fiona's livelihood and freedom as a hostage to extort my inheritance. I looked at Fiona, who was sobbing into her hands, terrified of losing everything she had worked for. I needed to play my part perfectly. I let my shoulders slump and forced my hands to shake as I touched the gold pen on the table. Mom, please, I begged, letting my voice crack. Do not involve the police. Fiona didn't do anything wrong. You can't ruin her career over a piece of land. Diana crossed her arms, looking down at me like I was an insect. Then pick up the pen and sign, Grace. Stop the drama and do what you were told for once. I will sign it, I whispered defeatedly. I will give Chelsea the land. But please, just give me 72 hours. I want to take this to a free legal aid clinic on Monday morning just so a public defender can explain the tax liabilities. I can't afford a surprise property tax bill next year. Just give me 3 days, and I'll sign it over on Wednesday. Bradley let out a barking laugh. Did you hear that? She wants to take a corporate contract to a free clinic. Those hack lawyers are going to charge her in food stamps. It's pathetic. Chelsea rolled her eyes but looked smug. Let the poor girl have her 3 days, Bradley. It doesn't matter who reads the deed, it's ironclad. We will meet at my downtown leasing office on Wednesday at exactly 12 noon. If you don't show up with your signature, Mom makes the call and Fiona leaves the hospital in handcuffs. I nodded quickly, maintaining the terrified facade. I grabbed the folder with trembling hands and practically ran out of the house. The second I stepped off Diana's manicured lawn, the fake panic vanished. My hands stopped shaking. My breathing slowed into a calm, calculated rhythm. I didn't drive back to my apartment. I drove straight to the city, to Harrison Cole's office. I dropped the deed on his desk. My sister is attempting to legally extort me, I told him. She's holding Fiona's nursing license hostage with a fake felony threat. I bought us exactly 3 days. I need you to authorize an unlimited budget from my trust account. I want a complete deep dive into why Chelsea wants this land so badly. I didn't even have to wait until Tuesday. Within 24 hours, Harrison called me. The news was staggering. The state government had quietly approved a multi-billion-dollar tech hub development right next to my 50 acres. The developers desperately needed my land for the primary highway access road. Because Chelsea advertised herself as the family's real estate expert, the developers had approached her 3 months ago. They had submitted a formal offer to purchase the 50 acres for $8 million in cash. $8 million. Chelsea was planning to steal that fortune from me to pay off her credit card debt and her IRS penalties. She was willing to send Fiona to prison just to secure her stolen payday. We are not going to wait for Wednesday, I told Harrison, my voice ringing with authority. Call the lead acquisition director of the development firm right now. Tell him the actual legal owner is in your office and ready to negotiate. But tell him the price just went up. If they want that access road, they are going to pay $12 million for it. And I want the contracts finalized and the cash deposited by tomorrow morning. Harrison grinned. Consider it done, Grace. The deal closed flawlessly. $12 million was wired into my account by late afternoon the next day. I was now a multimillionaire twice over. But my mind was entirely focused on Fiona. I knew I had to get her out of that house before Bradley destroyed her. I was just about to finally go to sleep on Sunday night when my phone rang. It was almost midnight. The caller ID showed Fiona's name. I answered immediately, and the sound of violent shivering and choked-back sobs filled my ear. "Grace, please help me," Fiona cried, her teeth audibly chattering. "I am so sorry to call you so late. I don't have anywhere else to go, and my phone battery is at 2%. I jumped out of bed, grabbing my keys. "Where are you?" I demanded, panic rising in my chest. "I am sitting on the concrete curb at the end of our neighborhood block," she whimpered. "Bradley locked me out. He came home drunk and left his phone unlocked. I saw messages, he's been seeing another woman for over a year. He's been paying for her luxury apartment using my stolen paychecks." When I confronted him, he lost his mind. He dragged me to the door and physically threw me out onto the porch. He told me if I ever came back, he'd tell the police I assaulted him. "I don't even have a coat, Grace. It's freezing." I told her to stay exactly where she was. I ran down to the underground garage of my building. I wasn't driving my old sedan anymore. Earlier that week, I had quietly purchased a brand new, inconspicuous black armored SUV. It looked like a standard high-end vehicle, but it was built like a military tank with bulletproof glass and a reinforced frame. It was the perfect vehicle for a woman going to war. I pushed the engine to its limit, merging onto the highway. Within 30 minutes, I pulled into Bradley's upscale neighborhood. I spotted Fiona immediately. She was huddled under a street lamp in thin cotton pajamas, hugging her knees to her chest. I slammed on the brakes and rushed out. I wrapped a thick cashmere blanket around her trembling shoulders and guided her into the heated passenger seat. She looked around the leather interior, completely confused, but she was too exhausted to ask questions. "You are safe now," I promised, pulling away before Bradley could see us. I didn't take her to my apartment. I drove straight to one of the most exclusive 5-star hotels in Manhattan. I pulled up to the valet, handed him the keys, and guided Fiona through the grand marble lobby. At the front desk, I handed the concierge a sleek black corporate card registered to Vanguard Zenith LLC. I booked the top-tier presidential suite for the rest of the week. When we walked into the penthouse, Fiona gasped. The room featured panoramic views of the city skyline and a massive soaking tub. I immediately ordered a room service feast for her. Fiona sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, holding a warm mug of tea. Grace, how are you paying for all of this? Whose car was that? What is going on? I sat down next to her and took her hand. I am taking care of you now, I said with absolute certainty. You don't ever have to go back to that house. You don't ever have to let Bradley control you again. Just rest tonight. Tomorrow, you are going to put on a beautiful dress, and you are going to watch them lose absolutely everything. Monday morning arrived with bright, cold sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our suite. I woke up with a profound sense of clarity. Fiona was already awake, sitting at the dining table. The dark circles under her eyes were gone, replaced by a steady, calm energy. I had arranged for a high-end personal stylist to visit the hotel. I told the stylist to bring a selection of powerful, elegant clothes, and I told Fiona to pick whatever made her feel unstoppable. She chose a stunning emerald green tailored dress that complemented her skin perfectly, paired with a sleek black wool coat and elegant heels. She looked breathtaking. It was a total physical transformation from the broken woman I had rescued from the curb. We left the hotel and took the armored SUV downtown. Chelsea's office was in a flashy high-rise in the financial district. We walked through the revolving glass doors and took the express elevator to the 20th floor. I could feel Fiona tense up, but I squeezed her hand. You've got this, I whispered. We stepped into the glass-walled conference room. Diana was already there, sitting at the head of the table, sipping an artisanal coffee. Chelsea was next to her, tapping her manicured nails impatiently. Bradley was leaning against the window, wearing a sharp suit and looking arrogant, as if he owned the building. The second we walked in, their smug expressions shifted. Bradley's jaw tightened when he saw Fiona. He had expected her to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. Instead, she was standing tall, looking more radiant and expensive than Diana and Chelsea combined. Where the hell have you been? Bradley snapped, taking a threatening step forward. I locked you out to teach you a lesson about respect, not so you could go running to my broke sister to cry. And what are you wearing? Did you spend your rent money to dress my wife up in a fancy dress? You'll both be evicted next week because you wanted to play dress up today. Fiona didn't flinch. She just stared at him with cold indifference. Diana cleared her throat, annoyed by the distraction. She only cared about the land. Enough drama, she commanded, waving her hand. She slapped the manila folder onto the table. Pick up the pen and sign the deed, Grace. Stop wasting our time. If you hesitate for even 1 second, I am calling the police to report Fiona for stealing my brooch. Bradley will corroborate my story. Do not test my patience today. I slowly pulled out the leather chair and sat down. I looked at the gold pen resting on the signature line. Diana and Bradley watched me with predatory anticipation. Chelsea leaned in, a triumphant smirk on her lips. She thought she had won. I held the pen over the paper for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. Then, I casually set the pen back down. The sharp clink shattered the quiet. Before I sign away my inheritance, Chelsea, I have one quick legal question, I said, my voice perfectly calm. What is the exact registered name of the limited liability company that is purchasing this property? Chelsea rolled her eyes. It's my primary holding group. You don't need to worry about the specifics, Grace. Just sign the paper so we can leave. I leaned back and crossed my arms. Is that the same primary holding group that is currently under a severe federal audit by the Internal Revenue Service? Or is it one of the shell companies you created to hide your massive fraudulent business losses? Chelsea's jaw practically unhinged. The triumphant smirk vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, terrifying shock. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving her pale and shaking. Diana frowned, looking between us. What are you talking about? She demanded. Chelsea is a successful broker. Do not dare accuse her of fraud. I ignored Diana and pulled the glossy architectural blueprints and the chain of emails from my bag. I slapped them onto the glass table, right on top of the quitclaim deed. "You aren't a successful broker, Chelsea," I said, my voice echoing. "You haven't sold a house in over a year. You are drowning in $250,000 of credit card debt. Your SUV has a repossession order on it. You desperately needed my 50 acres to save yourself from federal prison for tax evasion." Bradley scoffed. "You're delusional, Grace. Why would a piece of dirt save her?" I slid the emails toward him. "Because it's not just dirt, Bradley. The state just approved a multi-billion-dollar tech hub next to my property. The developers need my land for their access road. 3 months ago, they approached Chelsea, assuming she represented the estate. They offered her $8 million in cash." I turned back to my hyperventilating sister. "You orchestrated this entire scam to steal an Tam True Do Law buyout from me. You were going to use my money to pay off the IRS and keep the rest for your fake lifestyle. You and Mom were perfectly willing to frame an innocent woman and send Fiona to prison just to secure your payday." Diana stared at the emails in disbelief. "Tam True Do Law," she whispered. "Chelsea, is this true? Were you going to hide an Tam True Do Law transaction from me while I helped you threaten Fiona?" Diana wasn't angry about the crime, she was angry she had been cut out of the profit. "But there is a major problem with your plan, Chelsea," I continued. "I didn't spend the last 72 hours at a legal aid clinic. I hired a ruthless corporate wealth manager. And yesterday, I called the lead acquisition director of the development firm myself. I informed him I was the sole legal owner." Chelsea's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "I bypassed you completely," I said with a cold smile. "I sold the land directly to them yesterday afternoon. But I didn't sell it for Tam True Do Law. I sold it for Muay Hai True Do Law. The cash has already been wired into my account. You get absolutely nothing." A blood-curdling scream erupted from Chelsea's throat. She swept her arms across the table, knocking her coffee cup to the floor, where it shattered. "No," she wailed. "You ruined everything. They are going to arrest me. You stole my money. You destroyed my life." "It wasn't your money, Chelsea," I replied smoothly. "It never was." Chelsea collapsed onto the table, sobbing hysterically. The perfect golden child was gone. Bradley, seeing the ship sinking, didn't bother to comfort his sister. Instead, he moved to stand behind Diana's chair, putting on a mask of protective concern. "Mom, you need to distance yourself from Chelsea immediately," Bradley commanded. "If she's under federal investigation, the IRS will freeze her accounts. If you help her, they might audit you next. She is a liability." Diana stiffened. The terror of losing her status overrode any maternal instinct. She looked at her weeping daughter with disgust. "Bradley is right," she stated coldly. "Chelsea, I will not have my name dragged through the courts because of your illegal mistakes. Do not expect me to pay for your defense lawyers. You made this bed, now lie in it." Chelsea gasped, betrayed. "Mom, please. You can't abandon me." But Diana just turned her head away. Bradley smiled smugly. With Chelsea out of the way, he thought he was the sole heir to Diana's estate. He puffed out his chest and turned his arrogant glare toward me. "You think you're so smart, Grace?" he sneered. "So you got lucky selling a patch of dirt. But Muay Hai True Do Law is child's play compared to the real wealth in this family. You'll never touch the real money. Mom's house is worth millions, and as the sole executor of her trust, I control everything. When she passes, I inherit it all. You're locked out forever." He then looked at Fiona. "And as for you, stay with my sister. Because when I file for divorce, I'm going to make sure my lawyers leave you destitute. You won't get a single dime of my money." I sat perfectly still, letting him build himself up to the highest pedestal. Because the higher he climbed, the harder he was going to fall. I locked my eyes on his smug face. Are you sure about that, Bradley? I asked in a quiet whisper that commanded the room. Because a legal executor is supposed to protect a trust, not systematically drain it to cover illegal gambling debts. I pulled the second black binder from my bag and slammed it onto the table. The thud made Bradley and Diana jump. Are you sure about inheriting those millions? I asked. Because according to these certified bank records and the forensic accountants I hired, there are no millions left. You already stole them all. I opened the binder to the bright red financial charts. Your perfect golden boy lost his entire life savings, a nom ago, I announced. He has a severe gambling addiction. He blew all his money on crypto and reckless options trading. Bradley's posture collapsed. Sweat formed on his forehead. Shut your mouth, Grace. You don't know anything about the market. You're fabricating this. I pulled out the mortgage documents with Diana's forged signatures and slid them toward her. Then explain these, Bradley. When you ran out of money, you used Mom's estate as your personal casino chip. He forged your signature, Mom. He secretly took out a Sao Tram Gindu Law second mortgage and another High Tram Gindu Law line of credit in your name. He's been committing federal wire fraud and felony forgery for years. Diana picked up the papers with shaking hands. What is this, Bradley? She whispered, the color draining from her face. Why is there an Tam Tram Gindu Law debt on my house? I never signed this. He is already defaulting on the payments, I added coldly. The bank sent a final notice of intent to foreclose last week. Bradley intercepted your mail. He is bankrupt, and because of him, you are bankrupt too. Diana gasped for air, wide-eyed with terror. The country club life she valued more than her children was gone. She realized her house, her status, and her entire identity had been destroyed by the child she actually loved. Bradley was nothing but a pathetic thief. Bradley frantically reached for Diana's arm. Mom, I can fix this. I just need a little more time and a cash injection to beat the margin calls. The market will turn. Diana violently yanked her arm away. Do not ever touch me again, she hissed. You stole my life. I have nothing left because of you. She buried her face in her hands, crushed by the reality of her impending homelessness. I watched with zero sympathy. I wasn't finished. I pulled out a thick stack of legal papers bound in a blue cover and pushed it toward Bradley. What is this? He whispered. A finalized divorce petition, I stated. My attorney drafted it yesterday. You are going to liquidate that offshore account in the Cayman Islands and return 1 tram of Fiona's stolen wages to her account. You are agreeing to maximum permanent alimony and surrendering all claims to her future income. You are walking away with nothing. Bradley slammed his fist on the table. I'm not signing that garbage. No judge would authorize those terms. I'll fight her for years until she's bankrupt. I leaned forward. If you refuse to sign right now, I will make one phone call. I have surveillance photos of you with your mistress in that luxury apartment you paid for with Fiona's money. I fanned the photos out on the table. I will hand these to the divorce judge. But more importantly, I will hand the evidence of your wire fraud and forgery straight to the FBI. You're looking at Hai Muay Nam in federal prison. Sign the paper or wait for the agents to kick your door down tonight. Terrified, Bradley picked up the pen, the same pen Chelsea tried to use to steal my inheritance. He signed the divorce papers with a shaking hand and pushed them back. Fiona was finally free. Diana was hyperventilating, her knuckles white as she gripped her chair. She looked for a scapegoat and locked her furious eyes on me. You vicious little snake, she hissed. You orchestrated this to humiliate us. You destroyed this family today. I didn't force Bradley to gamble, and I didn't force Chelsea to lie to the IRS, I replied. I simply turned on the lights so everyone could see the cockroaches. Diana shrieked, slamming her hands on the table. Get out of my sight. You are officially dead to me. I am leaving right now to sit down with my bank president. We play golf together, he will help me fix this. I am going to remortgage the house and hire lawyers for Chelsea. And I am writing you out of my trust. You will never get a single dime from me. I let out a loud burst of genuine laughter. It shattered her dramatic exit. What is so funny? She demanded. You cannot remortgage the house, Mother, I whispered. You can't pull out any equity to save Bradley, and you can't hire lawyers for Chelsea using that property. And why is that? She snapped. Because you do not own it anymore, I stated flatly. Right on cue, the door opened, and Harrison Cole stepped in. He placed a stack of legal documents on the table. My name is Harrison Cole, and I represent the interests of your daughter, Grace. She is correct, Diana. You no longer own this estate. He explained that because the loans Bradley took out were unpaid, the bank foreclosed a thing ago. Bradley had intercepted every notice. Yesterday afternoon, Harrison continued, the estate was purchased in cash at the county auction by an anonymous corporate holding company. Diana stared at the paperwork. What is the name of the company? Vanguard Zenith LLC, Harrison replied. Diana started frantically calling her wealthy friends, muttering about suing the corporation. Chelsea lifted her head, makeup smeared. We can just offer them 10 fantram above what they paid. We can beg them to sell it back. I leaned forward. You don't need to negotiate with a faceless corporation, Chelsea. Because it's me. I am Vanguard Zenith LLC. The room went dead silent. I pulled out a certified bank statement from that morning and slapped it on the table. Printed at the bottom was a verified cash balance of exactly sao muoi bon true du la muoi true of that is from the land deal I closed yesterday, I explained cheerfully. The other nam muoi tu true is the payout from the Powerball ticket I won the night I called you from the ER. I didn't need surgery, Mom. I was perfectly healthy. I just needed to know if you would help me. You told me my poverty was a choice. So I figured it out. I bought your debt, and I bought the roof over your head. I stood up. Since I am the sole legal owner, I am giving you official notice of eviction. You have exactly bon muoi tam geo to pack your things and vacate my property. If you damage anything, I will have you arrested for felony vandalism. Kung Voi Du, I am having security escort you trespassers out right now. Harrison called the desk, and 3 massive security guards entered. Bradley shuffled out like a zombie. Diana had to be hauled up from the floor, sobbing. Chelsea was physically pushed toward the exit. The walk of shame began as they were paraded through the lobby in front of hundreds of people. They were thrown out onto the cold sidewalk, stripped of everything. The silence that fell over the conference room after they were gone was profound. Fiona was still sitting in her chair, staring at the spot where Bradley had signed away his control over her life. Is it really over? She whispered. I pulled her up into a protective hug. It is completely over. Bradley will never hurt you again. Fiona wiped a tear of joy. Thank you, Grace. You saved my life today. You saved my life first, Fiona, I said firmly. You drove 90 miles through a hurricane for a sister-in-law you barely knew. You were the only one who treated me like a human being when I had nothing to offer. And because of that, I have a gift for you. I handed her a sleek leather folder. Inside was the deed to a stunning, fully paid MOT Fay Nam Tru Du La luxury penthouse in the city. The property taxes and maintenance were prepaid for Hai Muay Nam. Fiona gasped, nearly dropping the folder. Mot Fay Nam Tru Du La? Grace, I can't accept this. You are accepting it, I insisted. And look at the second document. It was a certificate for an irrevocable trust fund. I deposited exactly Nam Tru Du La in pure cash into that account this morning, I explained. Bradley can't touch it. It will generate dividends for the rest of your life. You can do your nursing work without ever worrying about money again. Welcome to your new life. Fiona stared at the numbers. Nam Tru Du La. For years, she had been forced to account for every penny she spent on groceries. Now, she was independent. She broke down in tears of absolute joy, an emotional purge of years of abuse. When her sobs slowed, she looked remarkably different. The lingering fear in her eyes was gone. "What do I do now?" she asked, a genuine laugh escaping her lips. "You begin by taking a deep breath," I told her. "We are going to our hotel, ordering a ridiculous amount of room service, and tomorrow, we're picking out furniture for your new home." Fiona ran her hand over the folder. "I always thought family meant blood. I believed a good wife had to endure hardships. But family isn't defined by blood or marriage. Family is defined by loyalty," I replied. "It's the people who show up when you have nothing. My biological relatives proved they are parasites. You proved you have a heart of gold." We walked out of that building together, leaving the shattered remains of my biological family on the 20th floor. As we stepped out onto the busy sidewalk, the bright afternoon sun hit our faces. The autumn air felt refreshing, the first breath of unpolluted air I had ever taken. I knew exactly what was happening to the others. Diana was likely on a park bench, calling friends who would soon ignore her. Bradley was wandering the city, terrified of every police siren. And Chelsea was in a cheap motel, realizing her prison sentence was inevitable. They were trapped in the prisons they built with their own greed. I hadn't laid a single trap for them. I simply handed them the shovels, and they enthusiastically dug their own graves. "We need to celebrate properly," I told Fiona. "A 5-star restaurant, the most expensive appetizers, and we start planning your penthouse. And then, the bank to activate your non-true-do-law trust." Fiona linked her arm through mine. "I would absolutely love that. I won Bay Muay High true-do-law, but the cash was never the prize. The real prize was the clarity it brought. My blood relatives are just people I happen to be related to. Loyalty and respect are what make a family. I burned down my toxic family tree, but from the ashes, I found a real sister." So, looking back at Lambda now, I completely dismantled my own mother, brother, and sister, leaving them with absolutely nothing while giving an outsider a life of extreme luxury. Am I wrong for being this ruthless? Or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know whose downfall was the most satisfying to you down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button to hear more stories of toxic people getting their absolute karma. See you in the next one.